The void before battle was always the same, an almost holy stillness, where every creak of metal and hum of power conduits felt louder than a scream. Beyond the reinforced glass of the command bridge, stars shimmered against a black canvas, cold and ancient, unaware of the blood soon to be spilled in their light. Admiral Elena Carver stood at the viewport of the HSS Valiant, her reflection half swallowed by the darkness outside. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, though her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. The faint blue glow from the tactical holomap painted her face in ghost light. "Fleet status?" she asked quietly. Commander Ryan Holt, her second-in-command, stood a few feet away, his posture stiff but voice steady. "All 12 capital ships are in formation. The carrier Endeavor reports full fighter readiness. Destroyer wings are running final diagnostics. We're green across the board, ma'am." Elena gave a small nod. "And the stealth curtain?" "Operational. The opposition won't see us until we're already inside their kill zone." That was the idea. A single, brutal strike, clean, decisive, final. The opposition coalition, a splintered alliance of ex-human colonies turned separatist, had dug in deep around Erebus Prime, a lifeless planet turned fortress. They'd taken human technology, human ships, human blood, and used it against their own creators. For 6 years, the war had dragged humanity's soul through fire. Today, the Admiralty had decided it would end. Carver turned from the viewport, facing the bridge crew. "Signal to all ships. Once we breach the perimeter, no calm silence. We strike, we finish, and we do not linger. No mercy, no hesitation." The crew moved as one, a silent orchestra of precision. Holograms danced across the tactical table, blue for humanity, red for the enemy. The reds pulsed with heavy concentrations around the orbital shipyards of Erebus. Anti-ship platforms, drone hives, battleships, an iron wall. Carver's lips thinned. "They've fortified every approach vector," Holt smirked. "They won't expect us to come from the void side. No one's insane enough to risk the gravitational shear from the planet's shadow." Elena's voice was a whisper. "We are." The bridge fell silent again, save for the deep, rhythmic heartbeat of the ship's reactor. Outside, a faint shimmer spread across the black, the first ripple of the fleet dropping its cloaks. The Valiant surged forward, its drive flares cutting through the dark. Around it, 11 other ships emerged from nothingness, the formation blooming like a lethal flower. In the far distance, Erebus Prime turned slowly, a dark orb veined with defensive lights. On its horizon floated the Coalition's war fleet, more than 100 vessels, forming a barricade of steel and fury. Carver's voice carried through the comms net. "All ships, execute Operation Veilbreaker." The order unleashed a storm. Humanity's battle fleet accelerated as one, dreadnoughts thundering forward, carrier decks igniting with blue ion trails as hundreds of fighters poured into the void. Torpedoes streaked ahead, weaving through flak and counterfire like shooting stars. For a heartbeat, the enemy seemed frozen in disbelief. Then, the darkness exploded in color. Direct hit on enemy battleship Orion's Blade. "They're venting atmosphere!" Holt shouted. Carver's eyes never left the holomap. "Focus fire." "Keep the pressure!" A shockwave rippled through the bridge as the Valiant took a glancing hit to its forward plating. Sparks cascaded from a console. Alarms flared. "Shields at 73%! A tech officer called out. Carver's tone didn't waver. "Compensate. Helm, roll us 40 degrees port. Bring spinal guns to bear." Outside, the Valiant's hull rotated gracefully, its main rail batteries aligning with surgical precision. A single burst of white-blue light lanced across space, slicing an enemy destroyer clean in two. Its debris spun lazily, glowing red from the blast. "Another one down," Holt murmured. "They weren't ready for this." "No," Carver replied softly. They weren't. Hours of planning. Years of loss. Decades of humanity tearing itself apart. And in this moment, it came down to light and shadow, to who struck first and who burned last. On the enemy flagship, intercepts showed confusion, disarray. Coalition comms were collapsing under the shock. The Valiant's AI fed tactical readouts across the fleet network, vectors, shield matrices, target solutions. Humanity's fleet fought like one organism, a machine of vengeance. But deep down, Elena knew this wasn't victory yet. Not until the planet itself was neutralized. The opposition's orbital ring still hung intact, a line of massive guns capable of vaporizing ships from orbit. Fleet status? She asked. Holt scanned the feed. Casualties? Minimal. Endeavor's lost 2 squadrons. Hammerfall took damage but still operational. We're pushing them back hard. Good. Begin phase 2. Planetary strike? Carver's jaw clenched. Orbital ring first. Then the surface. Holt hesitated. There are still civilians down there, Admiral. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. The Coalition's using them as shields. Carver turned her gaze on him, calm but cold. If the ring stands, those civilians die anyway. So will everyone else. He looked away. Aye, ma'am. Minutes passed in violent eternity. The fleet carved through the last defensive ships, weapons flashing like lightning in a midnight storm. Fighter wings danced between beams and explosions. The Valiant shook again, its hull shuddering from the recoil of its own guns. Then the orbital ring came into view, a vast, skeletal band encircling Erebus, bristling with cannons and missile pods. It was both magnificent and monstrous, a crown of war built by those who once called themselves human. Carver stared at it for a long moment. All ships concentrate fire on ring segment C, break the chain. 1,000 guns spoke at once. The void turned white. Plasma beams converged on a single point, melting through steel kilometers thick. The ring cracked, then ruptured, a chain reaction racing around its circumference. Explosions bloomed like dying suns. On the planet below, shock waves tore across the surface, visible even from orbit. Ring is collapsing, Holt shouted. We did it! Carver exhaled slowly, her fingers trembling for the first time. Then it's time to finish it. Her voice dropped to a whisper, transmitted fleet-wide. Target command sectors. Leave nothing standing. In the final minutes of the assault, Erebus Prime's defenses failed completely. The Coalition's fleet was gone, shattered, burning, or fleeing into the black. Humanity's fleet cut them down without mercy. When the last hostile signature vanished from the map, a strange quiet filled the bridge. The battle was over, but no one cheered. Carver stood alone by the viewport again, watching the planet burn. Status report, she murmured. Opposition fleet destroyed. Ground resistance collapsing, Holt replied. We've won, Admiral. Elena didn't answer. Her eyes reflected the fire below, vast, unending, cruelly beautiful. After a long silence, she spoke. No, she said softly. We've ended it. The battle was over. But the void didn't know peace, only silence. And in that silence, the screams still echoed. The HSS Valiant drifted in low orbit over Erebus Prime, its once pristine hull now scarred with carbon scoring and cratered plates. Fires burned along the ship's dorsal spine, venting streams of vapor into space. Wreckage floated all around. Fragments of ships, shattered drones, frozen corpses turning slowly in the cold. Admiral Elena Carver stood on the bridge, her eyes hollow as she gazed at the scorched world below. What had once been a bustling colony, gardens under domes, cities under the stars, now glowed with lines of molten fire. Status of the planet? She asked. Commander Ryan Holt swallowed hard before responding. Surface scans show minimal life signs. Major population centers destroyed in the orbital chain reaction. Atmospheric contamination spreading. Radiation levels climbing. Elena's voice was steady. Define minimal. Holt hesitated. Maybe a few thousand. Out of millions. The words hung heavy in the air. The hum of the ship's engines filled the silence that followed, a mechanical dirge for the dead. Carver turned away from the viewport. Begin search and recovery operations. Deploy rescue drones to any surviving sectors. Aye, ma'am, but... Holt looked at her, uncertainty flickering across his features. Command's not going to like that. The directive was clear, no survivors. They'll say the risk of hidden insurgents. Carver's stare cut him off. That's an order, Commander. Yes, Admiral. Hours later, the med bays of the Valiant filled with the consequences of mercy. The rescued were mostly children. The elderly, wounded civilians, half-starved, shell-shocked, wrapped in thermal blankets. Medics worked without pause. Some of the crew avoided eye contact as they passed the stretchers in the halls. Lieutenant Sarah Whitfield, Carver's communications officer, approached her on the command deck. Admiral, incoming transmission. Encrypted Admiralty priority, Carver sighed. Put it through. The holographic seal of the United Terran Admiralty flickered to life before her, then resolved into the stern face of Fleet Marshal Adrian Voss, head of Earth Command. His voice was calm, cold, and unmistakably final. Admiral Carver, congratulations on your decisive victory. Erebus Prime has been neutralized. You've done what 3 other commanders failed to achieve. Carver stood straight. Thank you, sir. But the cost was— The cost, Voss interrupted, is irrelevant. The war is over. Humanity is united again. You've done your duty. Her jaw tightened. There are survivors. We're recovering as many as possible. Voss's expression hardened. Negative, Admiral. You will terminate recovery and commence sterilization of the planet. Immediate compliance. The air on the bridge seemed to freeze. Even the hum of machinery felt quieter. With respect, sir, Carver said slowly, those survivors are civilians. They're not a threat. Voss leaned closer, his eyes glinting like steel. Every surviving mind down there carries the ideology that started this war. They're seeds of dissent. You were ordered to cleanse Erebus, not coddle it. Carver didn't respond. She simply stared at him, the faint tremor in her hand betraying the war raging behind her composed face. Voss continued, his tone razor-sharp. This conversation is logged. Failure to comply will result in tribunal review for insubordination and dereliction of duty. End of transmission. The hologram vanished. The bridge was silent again. Holt glanced at Carver cautiously. Orders, ma'am? She didn't answer at first. Instead, she turned toward the viewport again, watching the dying planet below, orange cracks spreading like veins of fire across its surface. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Continue recovery operations. By the next rotation, the fleet's supply decks were packed with refugees. Engineers had repurposed cargo holds into makeshift shelters, rationing what little oxygen and food they could spare. Holt coordinated the chaos with grim efficiency, while Carver kept her distance, lost in the labyrinth of her own conscience. From orbit, the fleet's sensor logs showed intermittent flashes, fragments of the enemy's last transmissions, intercepted during the battle. One fragment in particular drew Holt's attention. He played it for Carver in the briefing room. A grainy image of a woman, her face bloodied, sitting in what looked like an underground bunker. Behind her, the coalition insignia burned on a cracked wall. We never wanted this, the voice said, faint and fading through static. We wanted freedom. Not annihilation, tell them! Tell them they became what we feared, the feed cut off. Carver closed her eyes. How long ago was that recorded? Hours before the strike, Holt replied. She was one of their council leaders. She sounds human, Carver murmured. She was, Admiral. They all were. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Carver opened her eyes, the weight of command pressing like lead against her shoulders. If command sends inspectors, they'll see what we did here. Holt nodded. They'll court-martial us. Maybe worse. Carver looked at him, and for the first time in years, she didn't sound like an admiral. She just sounded tired. Would you still follow me if it comes to that? Holt met her gaze without hesitation. I didn't sign up to kill what's left of humanity, ma'am, so yes, all the way. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. Then let's make this count. When the inspection fleet arrived 3 days later, the Valiant was already gone. They found only wreckage, the remnants of a faked explosion, data fragments suggesting catastrophic core failure. Official reports listed the ship and its crew as destroyed in post-battle residual combat. Admiralty Command closed the file without ceremony. But across the outer rim, whispers began to spread of a ghost ship carrying survivors of Erebus Prime, moving through the dark under false signatures. Some said they were pirates. Others said they were deserters. A few called them angels. On the bridge of that phantom ship, Elena Carver stared out at the uncharted stars, her reflection faint against the viewport glass. "Course plotted for the Perseus Expanse," Holt said from the helm. "No Terran patrols in that region for years," Carver nodded. "Engage when ready." The Valiant's engines flared to life, cutting a blue arc across the endless dark. Below decks, the rescued survivors huddled together, uncertain whether they'd been saved or kidnapped. Carver had no answers for them. Only silence, and a conviction she wasn't sure was still right. She closed her eyes. Hearing again the dying woman's voice from the intercepted recording, they became what we feared. Carver opened her eyes. The stars stretched into lines as the ship jumped into FTL, vanishing into the black. Far away, back on Earth, Fleet Marshal Voss read the final battle report. The words Erebus neutralized glowed in bold letters. He smiled faintly, signing the document with his identification code. But as he did, a single encrypted ping appeared on his terminal. A ghost signal, faint but undeniable, carrying one phrase: "The opposition was no more, but neither are you." The smile faded from his lips. The message vanished as quickly as it came. He sat back in silence, the faint sound of the clock in his office echoing like a heartbeat in the dark. The Perseus Expanse was a graveyard of stars, a stretch of dark systems and broken colonies, long abandoned after the first expansion wars. No patrols, no trade routes, no records, just silence and wreckage drifting through forgotten orbits. It was the perfect place to disappear. The HSS Valiant, or what remained of it, glided through the emptiness, its hull patched with mismatched plating and scavenged panels. Its transponder readouts had been scrubbed clean. On no map did this ship exist anymore. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, the air heavy with recycled oxygen and exhaustion. Crew and refugees lived side by side now, soldiers and civilians united by circumstance more than trust. Admiral Elena Carver walked the main corridor, passing sleeping families huddled in maintenance alcoves. Children stared at her with quiet, uncomprehending eyes. Some whispered monster when they thought she couldn't hear. Others whispered savior. She didn't know which was worse. On the bridge, Commander Ryan Holt was running diagnostics on the forward reactor coil. "We're burning through fuel faster than the reserves can sustain," he muttered. "If we don't find a refuel depot soon, we're going dark, permanently." Carver entered. "Options? Nearest automated station is in the Helios Drift, but that's still within Terran scanner range. If we're detected, they'll come for us," Carver finished. "And they'll erase everything we've done." Holt gave her a hard look. "Ma'am, we can't keep running. The crew's tired. Supplies are low. People are losing faith. They need something to believe in." Carver turned toward the viewport. The stars there looked different, distant, judgmental. "Belief is a luxury, Commander. Right now they need to survive." Down in the medbay, Dr. Marin Ellis, the ship's chief medical officer, tended to the rescued civilians. She was one of the few who still spoke to Carver without the stiffness of rank. When Elena entered, Ellis didn't salute. She simply handed her a data pad. "These are the latest medical reports," Ellis said. "Radiation sickness, malnutrition, trauma, you name it. We're running out of supplies faster than we can treat them." Carver scrolled through the reports. Hundreds of names. Most would never leave this ship alive. "We'll find a way," she murmured. Ellis folded her arms. "You keep saying that, Admiral. But every day we drift farther from civilization, from help. You think running makes you a savior? It just makes you the last ghost of a war everyone wants to forget." Carver looked up sharply. "And what would you have me do? Turn us in? Watch them execute the survivors as remnants of rebellion? Because that's what Command will do," Ellis's voice softened. "Maybe they'd spare the civilians if you—" "They won't," Carver snapped. "You weren't there, Doctor. You didn't see what they turned that war into." The two women stood in silence. Finally, Ellis sighed and looked away. "Maybe I didn't, but I do see what it's turning you into." Carver said nothing. She left the datapad on the counter and walked out. 2 days later, alarms blared through the ship. Contact! Multiple drive signatures approaching from high vector. Holt's voice cut through the comms. Terran scout drones, they found us! Carver burst onto the bridge. Evasive pattern Delta 7. Power down main drive and bleed emissions. The crew scrambled. Lights dimmed. The Valiant slipped into the shadow of a shattered asteroid field, its heat signature dropping close to zero. Outside, tiny flashes marked the movement of Terran drones sweeping the void, metallic predators sniffing for prey. Holt glanced at her. They're scanning in grid patterns. We won't stay hidden long. Carver's mind raced. Can we intercept their signal path? Maybe, but to do that we'd have to go active, and they'll see us the second we try. Elena's gaze hardened. Do it, Holt hesitated. Admiral, that's an order. The bridge went silent except for the low hum of power rerouting. The Valiant's comms dish unfurled, scanning for the narrow frequency that connected the drones to their Terran handler. Static filled the speakers. Then, a voice. Cold, distant, unmistakable, Fleet Marshal Adrian Voss. Any sign of the target vessel, proceed with orbital sterilization protocol. Carver's ship must be destroyed. There can be no trace. Carver stared at the speaker, her jaw tightening. Holt shut it off, muttering, They're not even trying to capture us anymore. Just erase us. Carver said nothing. Then she turned to her crew. If those drones reach Earth Command with confirmation, they'll send a fleet. We won't survive another engagement, so what's the plan? Holt asked. Carver's voice was steady, almost too calm. We hit them first. The bridge crew looked stunned. You're talking about attacking Terran assets, Holt said. That's treason. Carver met his gaze. They already branded us traitors. I'm just living up to the title. The ambush lasted less than 20 minutes. The Valiant rose from the shadow of the asteroids like a ghost from hell. Its cannons flared to life, shredding the drones before they could transmit. The final detonation lit the black sky like a dying sun. When the smoke cleared, silence returned. Holt exhaled slowly. That's it. No survivors. No transmissions. Carver nodded. Then we're safe. For now. But even as she said it, she knew better. Command would notice when the drones went dark. They'd come. They always did. That night, the Admiral sat alone in her quarters, a small, dim chamber barely larger than a cell. She played an old message on her datapad. It was from before the war, a clip of a speech she'd once given to new cadets at the Terran Naval Academy. Humanity stands united under the stars, her younger self had said. We explore, we build, we protect, because that's who we are. We are one species, one destiny. The irony hit her like a blade. A chime sounded at the door. Enter, she said. It was Holt. He stepped inside, hesitating before speaking. We found a planet, Admiral, habitable, small, isolated moon orbiting a gas giant. No settlements, no signals. We could settle there. At least temporarily. Elena looked at him for a long moment. And then what? Live like fugitives forever? He shrugged faintly. Better than living as ghosts. Her eyes softened. You still believe in something better, don't you? He smiled, weary but genuine. If I didn't, I wouldn't still be here. Carver stood, straightening her uniform. Then set a course. If this moon can sustain life, we'll make it home. For them. 3 weeks later, the Valiant descended through the clouds of the nameless world, a pale blue sphere surrounded by violet rings. The ship landed in a valley of glassy stone and thin atmosphere. The survivors stepped out beneath a twin sunrise, their eyes wide with disbelief. Children ran across the dusty plains. Adults stood in silence, breathing clean air for the first time in years. Some wept. Others prayed. Carver watched from the ridge, her hair whipping in the alien wind. Holt joined her. We'll need to ration power. Start hydroponics. Rebuild everything from scratch, she nodded. We'll make it work. He looked at her. And what about command? They'll keep looking, she said quietly. But by the time they find us, maybe they'll realize the truth. And what truth is that? Carver turned to him, the sunlight reflecting in her eyes, weary but resolute. That humanity doesn't survive by killing its own. It survives by forgiving what's left. Months later, a faint signal pulsed across deep space. A hidden broadcast, buried in the static between systems. It carried no coordinates, no names, only a single line of code that every officer in the Terran Navy would recognize. We are still here. On Earth, Fleet Marshal Adrian Voss stared at the report. The faintest smile tugged at his lips. Not of victory, but of something that looked like fear. He looked out his window at the distant stars. And for the first time in his long career, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, the ghosts of Erebus had found peace before he ever would.